So our quiz is on functions, and remember at the very beginning I reminded you that functions are sort of like equations, and we've been doing equations and graphing equations where we had x and y, and we could start with something like 3x plus 6y equals 12, and we could rearrange it so that we could graph y versus x. Functions, however, are pretty clear, and the notation for functions is traditional, so that inside the parentheses you put the independent variable, the one that plays the fiddle. It could be x. And then outside of the parentheses, usually f traditionally. Just the general function, they tell you they use f to represent that it's a function, and x that it's the unknown variable that can change. So f of x, meaning that x is my independent variable. And then the rule of the function can be anything. So for example, x minus 3. So for every x, for every value of x, there will be a value of f, and you will get this by taking x. So let's say I want to find the function at 7. This means that I'm going to evaluate my function at the point where x equals 7. So then instead of x, I'm going to put 7 minus 3. And I'm putting minus 3 because my rule asks for it. I'm just obeying the function. I'm following the pattern. Whatever you want to imagine, it's like a box, and inside that box there are several things that are going to happen to your number that you put in there, which is 7 in our case. And then the product, the final outcome, the output, it's called, of f will be 4, because 7 minus 3 is 4. Evaluating a function is plugging in a value instead of your variable and then making necessary calculations. So this whole thing is my function. Now my variable is x, and it's right here and right here. So when I'm asking you to evaluate this function at 5, I'm asking you to plug 5 in place of x. So let's see what we have. According to my function, the rule is 2, then parentheses, and parentheses always take precedence, as you remember. 5 minus 15, the good old order of operations, we call it. So and then x plus 3, so instead of x again, I'm plugging in 5 plus 3. Now I'm going to look at parentheses. These parentheses, 5 minus 15 is negative 10. And then I have to multiply that negative 10 by 2, which will give me negative 20. 5 plus 3 is 8. And this fraction, negative 20 over 8, can be simplified by 4, which will give me negative 5 over 2. And you can leave it like that, or you can convert this to negative 2.5. So ultimately your answer is f at 5 is negative 2.5. Our next function in the quiz is a quadratic function, and I'm saying it's quadratic because I have the second power. And even though you don't know how to graph these yet, I'm not asking you to graph them. All I'm asking you to do is evaluate this function. So again, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to take the number 2 in this case, because we're trying to evaluate this function at 2, and you are going to mechanically, quite mechanically, plug 2 in place of x. So f of 2, I'm going to follow the rule. X is replaced by 2 plus 3. Parentheses always take precedence, remember, and they are to the second power, minus 2 2 times x, my x is 2, so it's 2 times 2 plus 3. Inside the parentheses, these would spit out 5, and then 5 is to the second power, minus 4 plus 3. 5 to the second power is 25. Minus 4 plus 3, that's like minus 1, so that's going to be 24. If I have b of c, this notation will tell you that b will depend on c, equals, let's see, 10 minus c to the second power plus c. And that's all. And I want you to evaluate this b at, let's say, 3. That would be, in the parentheses, 10 minus 3 squared plus 3. That's 7 squared plus 3, and that would be 49 plus 3, which is 52. 49. 52. Let's say your function is w of y, and the function is a fraction where you have 2 times y squared minus 5. All that is divided by 10 minus 3y, for example. And I want you to evaluate this function w at, well, let's say 2. Let's make it harder and make it a negative 2. So we will have 2. Inside the parentheses, I have y squared. So technically, I'm going to say negative 2 squared minus 5. And then 10 minus 3 times negative 2. This is the mechanical part where I just took the negative 2, which was my y, and I plugged it in all the places where y had been. So then my w at negative 2 is going to be, so this negative 2 squared, negative number squared is a positive number, so that's a 4. Then 4 minus 5 is negative 1. So 2 times negative 1. Negative 1 came out from our parentheses, the big parentheses, the outward parentheses. So again, first I did negative 2 squared, that gave me 4. 4 minus 5 is negative 1, so hence I have 2 times negative 1. Then in the denominator, I have 10. Negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6, so plus 6. And altogether, I'm going to end up with a negative 2/16, which is negative 1/8. On Google Classroom, you have an attachment where you have 4 functions which you need to evaluate at a certain point, and I'm giving you answers. I'm not showing you how it's done, so you can do it yourself. However, if you don't get the right answer, email me your work so I can take a look-see and point you in the right direction. Maybe you had made some careless little mistakes and they're preventing you from getting to the right answer. All right, so the next video is going to be about evaluating function expressions.